Dear Miss Brenda Nicholson, I am writing to apologize to you for my actions in the Austin Nicholson matter. As an attorney and a judge, I have always...
In a woodsy neighborhood on the fringes of Denham Springs began a bitter custody dispute in the late 1990s between Rodney Nicholson and Kristen Fugele. Court records show the battle began with allegations of child abuse, that their 5-year-old son Austin was badly burned by scalding bathwater at the hands of his soon-to-be stepfather, Mark Fugele. At that time, a Livingston Parish judge named Jefferson Hughes III ended up elbow deep in the middle of it all, even though his position on the bench required him to rise above it.
Judges especially should have a duty to act beyond reproach.
Hundreds of once-hidden court documents just obtained by WWL-TV and our partners at the New Orleans Advocate reveal a federal grand jury investigated Hughes over it, and so did the Louisiana Judiciary Commission. So what led to the investigation in the first place? A judicial complaint filed against Hughes, an affidavit, and multiple sources say Hughes was in a relationship at that time with Denham Springs attorney Berkeley Durbin. Neither of them was married, and Tangipahoa Parish DA Scott Perilou says he remembers them dating at that time. But Durbin represented the Fugeles in various proceedings while Hughes was the judge. Austin's grandmother, Brenda Nicholson, was the first to raise concerns about Hughes and Durbin.
He said no, he wasn't going to recuse himself. We told him we knew about him in Berkeley, and we didn't think that it was right that he would be the judge in the case.
If true, legal experts say that would have been a big cause for concern. Indiana University Bloomington judicial ethics expert Charles J. said, quote, "That perception problem is problem enough. It's why the ethics code is worded in a way that you will act at all times in a way that promotes the perception of impartiality." The Nicholsons say they wanted Hughes off the case, but instead, Hughes gave Kristen Fugele full custody at a hearing that the Nicholsons said they didn't know about. The records indicate Hughes allowed Mark Fugele to be around Austin, even though Mark's criminal charges for allegedly burning Austin were still pending. And the records indicate Hughes knew that. After all, at one point, he was the judge in the criminal case, too.
Any other judge that didn't have a girlfriend that was their lawyer? Yes, I believe it would have been a lot fairer.
Instead of giving Austin back to his mother, Brenda Nicholson picked him up from school and took him home. Rodney then took him to Mississippi. Judge Hughes ordered both of them arrested for contempt of court. Brenda in Livingston Parish and Rodney in Mississippi. He held both of them for more than a week in jail. Hughes ordered the boy to be brought back to his mother. But the Mississippi judge refused, and caseworkers noted Austin was hesitant to return to his mother's care. The judge placed him in emergency foster care. Documents show Hughes went all the way to the Mississippi Supreme Court to get his order to return the child to Fugele enforced. But Child Protective Services stepped in, asking a Louisiana appeals court to stop the legal tug of war over the case.
How could you want to put a child back in a home with a person who has done something so serious to a 4-year-old child?
After the Judicial Commission investigation into Hughes' handling of the case came this letter.
I apologize to you for any inconvenience.
It's the only indication the Louisiana Judiciary Commission took any action. By law, the Commission's investigative process is kept secret if it stops short of official discipline like it did with Hughes. In the 2 decades since the investigations and the custody battle over Austin played out, Hughes climbed the judicial ranks, elected to the Louisiana Supreme Court in 2012. We and our partners at the Advocate reached out to Justice Hughes multiple times for this story. He declined to comment. Court records indicate Hughes denied having a relationship with Durbin to federal prosecutors. Brenda says the whole thing still haunts her. Mark Fugele would not agree to an on-camera interview with us for this story, but he did speak with us. He says he was in one shower and Austin drew his own bath in the other, but the water was too hot. He says he did not hold Austin in the water like Austin and court documents say one expert found. Mark Fugele says he got to know Judge Hughes during the time that his case was in his court, and that after Hughes no longer had the criminal case, Hughes advised him to plead no contest to the criminal charges against him to make the case go away. Mark did. Austin, now an adult, lives out of state. Ultimately, he was raised by his aunt. And Hughes continues to serve out his 10-year term on the Louisiana Supreme Court. Katie Moore, Eyewitness News.
And we also reached out to Durbin for comment. She did not respond. The federal grand jury never took any action in this case. Hughes was never charged with any crime.